North of the shore, but south of New York City.
And welcome. People have a lot of issues around sex, and yet still it is, of course, the most popular thing to talk about, unless you're dealing with a therapist revealing the most intimate details of your life, which is what our next guest, David Ortmann, does for a living. Welcome.
Thank you, David.
So tell us, how did you become a sex therapist?
Well, it was a long road. I was a teacher in Europe and then back again in America. And being a teacher is great because you get to work with children, and they're so honest and exuberant about their questions. But I felt like I didn't have enough training to answer their questions honestly, especially when children started asking me about sex. Mm-hmm. So I decided that I wanted to be a therapist, and in getting that education, no one in my school would even talk about sex.
And what school was this?
This was San Francisco State. And we had, in the entire 6-year journey to being a private practice therapist, which that's roughly how long it takes to get your license and everything, 1 6-hour class on sexuality. Yeah.
And so what can you learn about sexuality in an hour?
Well, I had Marty Klein, who's the sexologist from Palo Alto. So with Marty, you can learn about 15 hours worth of information in 6 hours. But it really sealed for me that our profession has a huge hole in it. And especially people who practice more esoteric. I don't like the word vanilla, I use the word classic, more classic sexuality. So the bondage, leather, kink community, the fetish community didn't really have a whole lot of service options. So I saw that hole and decided to fill it.
And is that, I'll leave that, I'll leave that pun just sitting on the table. Do you still see that even in the Bay Area, Northern California, or even within the LGBT communities, that your occupation is still kind of looked at askance?
Yes.
And why?
Because it has the word sex in it. Mm-hmm. I mean, sex is still one of those. I think my father once told me that I think the things that you don't talk about are religion, politics, and sex. Religion and politics are over talked about, I think, today, and that's great. I mean, they're off the table as taboo subjects. Sex still is a problem for a lot of people.
Even though when you turn on the TV or pick up a magazine or a newspaper or a website or a blog, most of it's about sex.
Sex is fine if it's for porn, entertainment, or strictly education, but rarely anything that couples or other relationships talk about or share with their friends, or sometimes within the relationship talk about.
Now, you have developed an expertise for working with I guess, for want of a better phrase, what Peter Ackworth, the founder of Kink.com, called the kinky community.
Yes.
Would that be an accurate description of your niche market?
Absolutely.
And what does the kinky community have as far as issues that are unique to dealing with its sexuality? When they come to you and say, I've got an issue, in what way is it different to language or make them feel comfortable than it would someone who, as you might say, adhered to classic sex? I've never heard it called that, but it's kind of fun.
Well, I always thought vanilla was kind of pejorative to people who don't practice more esoteric or kinkier forms of sex. So I wanted you to imagine what it was like in the 70s, pre-Evelyn Hooker and pre the depathologizing.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, you just made it up. There you go.
Of homosexuality. What did homosexual men and women face with therapists when there was a diagnosis that said that your sexuality was actually a pathology?
Right, because wasn't it in 1974, 76 that the AMA, the American Medical Association, removed homosexuality as a pathology, correct?
Right. I'm trying to think of when Evelyn's research was, and that was around 70. Well, it spanned years. I don't have the date in my head, but it was the mid to late 70s. So now we have another DSM, which is kind of the Bible of mental health, and things like sexual sadism, sexual masochism, transvestic fetishism, other things that we play with in the kink community are actually able to be diagnosed as mental illnesses. So you have to imagine that what a kinky person comes to me and experiences and fears is exactly what a gay man going to therapy in 1958 would experience. Most of my clients are what I like to call therapy refugees. They've been to therapy before. They've been to 3 or 4 therapists who have tried to make their sexuality the problem, even though they're coming in about vocational anxiety. But the problem is, you're getting tied up by your partner. There's a power imbalance, and power imbalances are not okay in our society, particularly in California. So I have
Why
to
do you say that?
undo all that.
Because of forced political correctness?
Well, because here, yeah, I mean, you really have to buy the mothership theories if you want to live in California. I mean, you can't be moderate in California without being, you know, run out of town on a rail as a Republican. I mean, you have to like grind your own coffee beans and recycle, and everything needs to be equal in the bedroom, and everyone needs to feel good and be happy. And this is kind of almost like a little cultish for me. So I like to break it down. Power is not always equal, and what is great about the kink community is the awareness and the consciousness and the communication that's required to have good kinky sex is it breaks that mold of we're not going to talk about it.
Right. So, just bear with me here a second. Using that argument that California is just too politically correct for its own good, it would be easier for a kinky sex aficionado to be in the Midwest, where roles of top and bottom and domination and submission are more defined?
I wish I could even entertain that. I've never been to the Midwest except for Chicago, and I think Chicago is its own animal because urban areas are. No, but I think I hate the term politically correct too. We've got to come up with something else, but I don't think it necessarily translates that people are sexually open and able to communicate. So,
what do you think has been, well, both ways, the LGBT community's contribution to sexual communities such as those that engage in kinky behavior, SM, that sort of thing, and vice versa? What has been the kinky community's contribution to the LGBT communities?
It's hard to say.
I mean, for instance, when I moved here, Folsom Fair, and Folsom was a quote-unquote gay event. And even within the gay community, it was, wow, that's a little out there. And now it is, I don't think it's quite parity, equal women and men, but it is certainly, there are women there are non-gay people. It is like this whole other community came up that myself as a openly gay man was educated about. It's like, wow, I didn't know there were all these different flavors of sexuality.
Right. Well, you're making an interesting point, because what Folsom Street Fair was in the 70s, I think when it was called Ringgold Alley Fair, and in the 80s and in the 90s, it was kind of a private party where people who were still almost secretive about their lives got together to celebrate for one day. Now, we have 3 dance floors, we have 18 different performers. There's people coming strictly to watch. Just to kind of gawk. And we've got men, we've got women, we've got our trans brothers and sisters, we've got someone's naked on a cross, someone's got their penis out and urinate. It's a free-for-all. But it's also become more accepted, quote-unquote accepted, that it can be this wild free-for-all for everybody.
Now, do you think that is necessarily I use the word carefully, a healthy thing for some of your clients? For some of your clients, is going to Folsom a good thing or something that's troubling?
Folsom's a tough example, but let's just say that I'm very happy that it's there, just as I'm happy that Door Alley is there, just as I'm happy that Harrison Fair is there, because it gives people a place to go to put on new clothes and feel sexy in a way that they can in their daily life. The flip side of that is that we are becoming more mainstreamed.
When you say we, who do you mean?
The kink community. I'm thinking of Folsom in general.
Yes.
I mean, Folsom used to be a small private party.
And now it's got corporate
and now
sponsors.
Bud Light, I can't get away from it. I mean, I have to choose which vodka I want. And on top of that, it's really kind of hard to get around. I mean, a friend of mine was had a knife pulled on him at Folsom last year. It was like, it's become kind of, anyone is welcome and it's unmanageable, which is part of one of my criticisms of San Francisco. Everyone is welcome. Everyone can do whatever they want. It's all free for all. We can do, unless you have any kind of moderate or conservative ideas, then forget it. But the woman who used to give the tours in the Castro, I'm forgetting her name. Trevor Haley had a wonderful quote. Our tolerance is being misused, and I think that it can be said of people who are living on the street. And I'm not talking about the homeless who have no hope. I'm talking about kids from Orinda who are coming here for a day. And there's many other ways that we can look at our liberalism and our tolerance as being kind of abused. So anyone can come to Folsom, including, the guy on meth with a knife. I don't necessarily think that's helping my clients or helping any of us. But as an event, it's the best one in the world.
In our last few minutes, tell us about your personal story of how your life interfaces with your professional life. Because we were talking about how before people who dealt in sex therapy were supposed to be neutral. Hi, I'm not gay, I'm not straight, I'm not attractive, I'm not unattractive. I have to be this cipher. You don't believe that?
Well, no, I can't be. Because I had a life before I was a therapist. I was a model and an actor, and I dressed up and wore clothes and posed nude, and it was, that was my life. I had a life. And yes, we are supposed to be these almost sexless, castrated beings, but I don't really think that serves anyone, to dress in beige and pretend that you are fading into the background. So how it started for me is a long story. I mean, I'm completely out that I'm a member of the kink community as well as someone who provides a service to the kink community. I don't only work with kinky men and women. But I think the first girlfriend I had in college she was pretty wild.
Because you still self-identify as a bisexual man.
Well, I self-identify as gay, but I like to not have women taken off the menu. So I guess technically on a Kinsey orientation, I'm bisexual.
You're not a 6?
No, no. So my first girlfriend, pulled the bandana off my head. I was a hippie, I had long hair, and ripped it off and tied my arms behind my head and slapped me across the face and across the butt, and then just kind of basically used me for her sexual pleasure. And I had sex before, but that was by far a pivotal experience in, wow, this is turning me on, it's exciting, it's scaring me a little, and there's a power imbalance that is obviously loving, but it's exciting.
And do you think to a lot of gay men who, might feel that they've been abused enough by the world, that the whole idea of getting whipped and tied and whatnot is just a bit too much for them to deal with?
I'm sure there are gay men out there who feel that way, but I think there's nothing more powerful than taking abuse, turning it around, taking the power back, and playing with the power and abuse, let's say, or pain and sensation on your own terms.
What do you think is the greatest misperception about the BDSM community?
That we are sick, that we only do this, that we are always in leather and whips and chains tied to the radiator waiting for our partner to come home and whip us. I mean, the people in BDSM, I know attorneys, I know activists and artists and therapists and students and people who are just curious and mentors who've been around forever, the Gandalfs of the community.
Like people like Carol Queen.
Carol Queen, Dossie Easton, Race Bannon, Richard Sproat, Guy Baldwin, I mean, Marty Klein. These are my heroes.
Right. In our last seconds, is there a website where people can go to learn more about your work?
Yes. It's www.dopsychotherapy.com.
We've been speaking with David Ortmann, learning about safe kinky sex. Now we're going to learn about how you can connect through online mobile devices. We'll be right back.